What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. That is David Neal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald. Now, the Miami Dolphins hosted their first Monday Night Football game since 2017 last night, or it's Monday night. There was a lot of juice, a lot of energy in Hard Rock Stadium, and it was a night to remember, but for all the wrong reasons. The Dolphins entered the game without a loss to a team with a losing record. Um, but in came the Tennessee Titans, who entered Week 14 with the second to worst record in the AFC. The Dolphins, after kind of slogging through that game, built a 14-point lead late in the fourth quarter with just 4 minutes left. But just as quickly as they built that lead, it all fell apart. Miami gave up 15 unanswered points in a 28-27 shocking defeat that knocked them off of their spots as the top team in the AFC. And there's much more consequences, maybe even far-reaching consequences from that, with some key injuries. Mike McDaniel just a couple hours ago announced that Connor Williams, starting center, is out for the year with the torn ACL. Tyreek Hill, who kind of fighting through an ankle injury, it wasn't really his normal self. He's day to day, and the Dolphins have a ton of injuries to monitor as they try to, lick their wounds and move on to a short week, but a divisional opponent on the horizon with the New York Jets. We're gonna get into everything regarding that epic collapse. I believe the stat is it was, prior to this Monday night game, the last 767 teams who were down 14 points with 3 minutes left, they had lost, but that all changed. And potentially the trajectory of the Dolphins season may have changed with this loss. We're gonna start not big picture yet, but just focusing on those last 4 minutes because I think, you know, everyone was kind of wondering what happened. Because it was very quick the way it all fell apart. You have, again, I don't think this was a game that the Dolphins really deserved to win in any right in any regard. Um, but it looked like they were gonna have some fortuitous bounces. You have the muffed punt, you
Yeah.
get
You,
score on
you
two
gotta have
plays
those
later.
games. You gotta have those games.
You get the mishandled pitch with Levis and Henry, and before you know it, like it was 13-10, you score 17 unanswered, and it's like, all right, well, the Dolphins didn't really deserve to win that game, but hey, sometimes the good teams find a way. The Dolphins didn't find a way this time. We saw Will Levis go down really two drives. This was a defense that was been one of the best units in the past couple weeks. And they let a rookie quarterback in Will Levis go down and very quickly, especially the second drive. There's 26 seconds, 4 plays, 64 yards. And before you know it, the Dolphins had the ball back, down one with 1 minute 45, no timeouts left. And we saw how that unfolded. Tua Tagovailoa couldn't get the ball past midfield. He was sacked on fourth down, and that was all she wrote. Um, it was interesting because I think that the one thing, and I wrote about this last night, the one thing that you could say about the Dolphins leading up to Monday night was they always took care of business against the teams they were expected to. Every other contender had and we talked about this last week, every other contender had a how did that happen type of loss to a team, to a so-called inferior opponent. But the Dolphins, to their credit, I believe they were 8-0 or so against teams with losing records. Now, obviously, I think that it's much more there's much more nuance and context to it. We talked about a lot how injuries are playing a role in every single team, but the facts of the matter is, this offense wasn't the same with a hobbled Tyreek, and I think that he may have kind of validated some of the MVP talk that people
Yeah.
were bringing up, but also, I mean, for the majority of this game, the Dolphins were playing with one starting offensive lineman. Connor Williams went down. They were already playing without Teron Armstead, Rob Hunt. And then he goes down. You're just left with Austin Jackson, and for as good and the strides that they've made, there's very few teams and very few quarterbacks, very few offensive play callers that are going to be able to overcome that many injuries. And even on the other side of the ball, McDaniel talked about some breakdowns in communication on those late drives. You're without your top two safeties. You're without your inside linebacker who communicates the calls. Obviously, Jalen Phillips is gone. It was a bad loss, and I truly think that some of the injuries and whatnot that we can discuss later are probably going to have more far-reaching consequences. But like if you're gonna like the world isn't falling. Like I know that overreaction Tuesday, overreaction Monday, that's natural, and there's a lot of frustration, especially with McDaniel and his game management, play calling. Um, But if you really want to flip it, like the Dolphins still do control their destiny. There's 4 games left. They got a tough 4 games left. But they're in a position where if they do take care of business, they're the 1 seed and kind of all is forgiven. Now, are they going to do that? Are they going to be able to do it? We'll talk about that later. It's a tough uphill battle. But I don't want to make too much of this one. I think that the nature, I think that the last 3 minutes aren't as important to me as some of like the bigger picture issues that are wrong with this team right now and some of the injuries that they might not be able to overcome.
Well, I think last night was is it was a team effort.
Yeah.
Um,
Mike McDaniel said it was a legitimate team loss. You can
yeah, yeah,
point
yeah.
to offense, defense, and special teams.
Yeah, they obviously special teams got them the chance, got them the lead near the end, but there's also the blocked field goal earlier, and but you're up 14, um, and you got to get a stop. You got to get not just you got to get a stop. You got to slow them down.
Yeah, it
You,
wasn't even
you,
it wasn't even the fact that they gave because again, like I remember
they moved down the field like
yeah.
this
If
looked like the 2006 Colts or something with
if the Titans
Manning and
score if the
Harrison and Wayne.
if the Titans score that first drive, if the first touchdown and then the ensuing 2 point conversion that they got to bring it to two, I mean to six, if they score in 3 minutes, like I don't know if we're having this
Right,
conversation
right. It takes right. They didn't slow them down at all. They just walked down the field. Okay, okay, and then you're hoping the Dolphins can run a 4-minute offense, which is obviously right. Yeah, it is tougher when you have one starting offensive lineman.
But they did, but they ran for, hey, I will say though, they ran for 158 yards, albeit with
And
four. So I mean,
yeah,
that was the time to get it done.
yeah, and that's the time to at least start running the clock. I know it's cool now to be aggressive, and I get it. And the analytics say is let's go for it, be good. But sometimes you gotta step back and go, you know what? All we gotta do is get to the finish line ahead of the other guy. And and if you gotta use the clock and make them use their times, make them make just suck down some of that time and create a sense of urgency on their side, a greater sense of urgency on their side. Not only make maybe even if you don't get a first down, you just make things a little more stressful. They kick the ball back, and I'm looking at that going, "Ooh,
Yeah, I mean
that's just
they tried to run
way
twice. They had a three and out after the first
too much
touchdown,
time."
and
Right?
they just weren't able. I mean, we tried we gave them credit in the past for being able to run situations. That was always my big thing. You got to be able to run in key moment situations where it's short
Yeah.
yardage, goal to go, 4 minute. That was like a 4 minute offense type of deal. And in that
Oh,
moment,
exactly.
they weren't able to. They weren't able
Yeah,
to.
that's exactly it. Eric gets ball, you're thinking, okay, let's see what they can do, and they they did nothing to create any extra stress on Tennessee, who then just walked down the field again, and um, I think it does it points up some shortcomings. I mean, points up a lot of shortcomings in the Dolphins, but um, it just all night like I thought going in, we're gonna have one of those like I was saying last week, one of these Monday Night Football, crowds into it, going crazy, and I thought to get the game started, you know, but even early on when you get Dolphin players down early,
Yeah, like you have like
you're like
four guys go
4 minutes into
down
the
within
game,
like
and you're like
yeah.
going, and you're already feeling that life is just getting sucked out. You can feel somebody reaching for the plug, and they get it to 7-0. Okay, okay, let's see if they can build on that. And yeah, once it got to 7-7, honestly, it just felt like one of those nights where you're like, oh, this is gonna be a weird one.
Yeah.
You're just gonna want to get out of here with the win alive. Forget the style points, forget anything else. This is just not this is not gonna be the beatdown. And and it wasn't. And yeah, you start losing guys the way they did, and you lose key people. You lose the loss of the center.
I mean, we
You
we saw we saw how there was a
right
missed
now,
exchange. The first
and the
possession they
two
get down to the 2 yard line,
right
and you don't
two
even come
Tua
away
took
with points
credit for
because
that,
of
but
that.
still, that probably doesn't happen.
If Connor Williams is in there.
Yeah,
And yeah,
right.
and Eichenberg had a tough game.
Yeah,
He's presumably the starting center going forward, and I think that he had a look. I mean, he filled in earlier in the season when Connor Williams was out, and I think he got better as time progressed. But he's not a natural center. I mean, he was kind of like the last resort option that they've kind of settled on, and he's improved. But I mean, Connor Williams was playing at a Pro Bowl, All Pro level. I mean, like the Dolphins general were like honestly missing three Pro Bowl caliber offensive linemen on Monday night. And again, everyone's dealing with injuries, but we got to be honest, like very few offenses, very few quarterbacks here, especially a quarterback like Tua, where everything is, predicated on timing. They're just not going to be able to overcome that. And then when you have Tyreek Hill, who's not even in the game, I mean, we saw the difference in that offense where,
right,
he and
right.
he said the Titans dared us to run. And then when they tried to throw, we tried to put a shell over the top, and we don't have Tyreek, having the defense gravitate to him. It's a little harder. Jalen Waddle is an excellent young wide receiver, but it's different when Tyreek Hill is out there, and it's different when he's hobbled and he's out there. I think we saw the difference in that on Monday night.
I was, I mean, obviously you want Tyreek out there because that he draws that attention, even if he's hobbled.
But when he went out, I was thinking, okay, I want to see what this offense is about. I want to see what
Right,
this offense is about.
but but I was supposed to say you want put it out there, but at some point, like Tennessee knew, so there's it's not the same offense, yeah, there was a lot of the who do you vote for MVP, whereas a lot of that got pushed to the Tyreek Hill side last
Yeah,
night.
a lot of people's perceptions was reinforced, or you had some people that were kind of changed their opinions based because I mean he came back in that game. I mean, I know the first drive he came in was a 3-and-out, but it was right at the end of the third quarter. They throw a little comeback to him for 21 yards. All right, we back in business. They throw a little corner shot to him. All right, we in the red zone. It's like, all right, like the the
Yeah,
tenor of the offense was just different
yeah,
when he was out there and he was able to make plays for them.
it's completely different, and uh when he wasn't, I it is angering that they were not able to, or they didn't feel comfortable leaning on the run game a little more when it came time to do that. And that's kind of a lesson you'd hope they learned last year, you know. And that's a little annoying that, not saying you're never going to make the same mistake twice or two or three times, but that was one of those you kind of hope the Dolphins had moved on from. Uh, yeah,
It was a melting pot. It was a
it was one of those games. It's exactly why, winning every game against, under 500 competition is tough in the NFL because it doesn't take much, and suddenly you're not you're not punching down. Suddenly you're in an even fight, and the other guy, you're in an even fight, and the other guy doesn't have anything to lose, and you know they're energized because now it's an even fight. You're kind of having to adjust to it. These things happen, but the Dolphins had the opportunity to get out of there with the win, and they didn't, and that is uh, that's disappointing, and it doesn't. And some of the things they showed don't bode well for going forward. And there's the Jets are the Jets. They have a very good defense, and somebody took over Zach Wilson's uniform or something. He conjured the spirit of you know I don't know, Joe Namath for one day or something. Um, but after that, they've got you've got Baltimore. Dallas is playing. Looks like they're playing as well as anybody in the NFC. Well, as well as anybody not San Francisco in the NFC and maybe in the NFL. And then you got Buffalo, who all in-game funkiness aside, they deserve to win that game against Kansas City, and now suddenly what looked like a cruise to the number one seed or
Now
a
we're
possible.
talking about even if you can get the division because the Bills are just two
Now
games
you're looking
back
at, hey,
and they got the head to head.
just take the division, just and it, I think if anything, football players, they're NFL players are, they are week to week people, much more so than the fans and the media are, but they also do, you know, they also look down low a little bit. But I guarantee this really puts places of focus. If there need to be any readjusted focus in that facility, it got readjusted last night. I don't think there's any long range looking. You got to take care of business this week because you don't, if you don't, I mean, there's a lot of those problems left. There could be serious problems.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Bradley Chubb, who, he also had a key mistake earlier in the game, kind of, missed out on a sack on third down, slammed his helmet on the turf,
He's too old for
and
that.
and then you extend the drive, and that leads to a touchdown that ties the game. That's a 4 point swing right there. And
Yeah,
he talked about how they may have taken their foot off the gas. He said may have looked ahead a little bit. And unfortunately, you can't do that. Before you know it, you have these types of finishes and whatnot. So again, I mean, it looked, after Sunday's results, because the Chiefs lost, the Jaguars lost, it looked like it was a two-man race for the number one seed, and it very well could be that. But now you look over your shoulder, and you got the Bills just 2 games ahead with 4 games remaining and the head-to-head. So the Dolphins, the margin for error for the number one seed was already very, very slight. Now the margin for the division, which we all thought was kind of a foregone conclusion, that becomes more of a topic now. So yeah, a very tough 4 game slate up, and the Dolphins can't, if I think that if they had won the next 2 games, won the Titans game, won the won the Jets game, it's like, all right, in that 3 game finish, you can kind of, maybe drop one or two, but make sure you beat Baltimore. Now you're trying to make up that game on Baltimore with the head-to-head matchup coming up in week 17.
right. And well, you know, like I say, now you really are trying to, you gotta, you're trying to keep from doing a major slide, because that's entirely possible now. And the the Bradley Chubb penalty, I was, I, you too old for that. You're too old for that. You're too good for that. You're a team leader. And what is that? What I was. I mean, I can't imagine. You know, uh, that kind of penalty. I can't imagine, like, Sasha Barkov, Keith Chuck, pick any of the Heat, Bam Adebayo. I was having a hard time coming up with imagining them having an equivalent penalty in that kind of situation that, just gives the other team an opportunity. It was childish, and that's very disappointing from a team leader, a veteran team leader. That doesn't speak well either. I mean, nobody's perfect, things happen, but my goodness, that is just not something that at all you expect to happen. That
Yeah,
you, but that you, that makes you feel good, you know, go going forward, you know, um, because it's like, are you what, are you out your daggone mind? What is wrong with you?
yeah,
This isn't something you do these days. You can't do that in high school. Much less the NFL. You miss a sack, you missed a sack. Yeah, you missed a sack. It sucks, but move on. It just and to extend the drive and gives the other team points in a game where you know they needed every point they could get and they got them. And you just helped them. I found that was disturbing. And it's just disturbing for what that it happened with that player and a veteran leader. It's not something, you know, It's doesn't speak well.
Yeah, I mean, McDaniel, I mean, well, I'll start with Chubb. He took accountability for that. Said obviously as a team leader, is, one of the players that people look up to. People look up to on the team. Can't make that mistake. McDaniel said it was just kind of the whole game was just kind of an amalgamation of mistakes and kind of out of character mistakes, particularly, and that was one of them. So just a perfect storm, to have a nightmarish ending and a potentially costly defeat late in the season. So again, they quickly got to turn their attention to the Jets on a short week and a divisional opponent. So we'll see how they respond in the coming days. All right, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, does this defeat change your perception of the Dolphins and their outlook, especially with some key injuries to monitor over the final months of the season? Stay locked with us, and we'll be back soon. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins in that podcast with David Neal, talking all things Dolphins. Now, in the first half, we put a bow on a nightmarish, epic collapse, a historic collapse for the Dolphins, who entered
We
week
put a garbage tie on that bad boy.
a garbage tie.
Oh,
Now the
with
Dolphins
little
enter
twist ties.
Now the Dolphins entered Week 14 as the AFC's number one seed. They came in on a three-game winning streak. Obviously, that comes to an end. And they fall one game behind the Baltimore Ravens for the top spot in the conference. They're still the number two seed, but at 9-4, they're just one game also back in front of the Jaguars and the Chiefs with four games remaining. And we've talked for so many weeks about this kind of daunting final game stretch where it's quickly approaching and just about here. The Dolphins have a game against the Jets, a home game, coming up on a short week, and then after that starts like the real slate that I think we all said would decide the Dolphin season in one way or another. They have the Christmas Day home game, Christmas Eve home game against the Cowboys. They travel to Baltimore to face the Ravens on New Year's Eve, and that's a game that's increasingly look like it could decide the number one seed. And then they wrap up with a home game against the Bills in the regular season finale. But we had to kind of turn our attention away from just the number one seed because after that loss and the Bills' really big win in Kansas City over the Chiefs, the Dolphins are just two games ahead of the Bills for the top spot in the AFC East. Now that's notable because the Bills took the early season matchup in Buffalo, so they had that head-to-head tiebreaker. And if you look at the schedule, it's kind of favorable for Buffalo. I mean, they have a tough game coming up against the Cowboys, but I believe they also have the Chargers, who are going to be without Justin Herbert for the rest of the season because he's having surgery on a broken finger. I believe they have the Patriots, and then they wrap up with the Dolphins. So I mean, you're kind of like looking up at the number one seed saying, how can we get there? But you also kind of look behind and say, hey, we also have to make sure we take care of business in the division. I would say I know there's a lot of talk, and again, overreaction Monday, overreaction Tuesday. It's natural. I always say like you're not as bad as you looked in a loss, and you're probably not as good as you looked in a win. So when the Dolphins were racking up wins against the Raiders, against the Commanders, against the Jets, I think that they showed strides, but I don't think that they were tested in some ways that I think that better teams would test them. And again, they had a lot of mistakes against Tennessee on Monday night. But I'm not like I think they're going to make the playoffs. I mean, I'm not obviously it's not a foregone conclusion, but I still think they're in a really good spot to make the playoffs. My concern is that the kind of follow up and residuals from some of these injuries that are really starting to pile up. The Dolphins held some guys out. They dealt with some injuries. Connor Williams is going to be out for the rest of the season. My concern is that, it might start to catch up to them. Because again, can't you're just not going to be able to have a functioning offense consistently with four starting offensive linemen out. I still think that they're as dangerous as any team in the NFL when they're at their best, and I think that depending on how healthy they are, they're still a really tough matchup for a lot of teams. But I go back to what I said last week when I said if they can get the number one seed, I feel very confident that they could make a run to the Super Bowl. That's all in flux now because, they might get the number two seed and shoot, they got to make sure that they can clean up and take up care of business in the division. Um, but matchup wise, I still think that they're a very good matchup for just about every team in the AFC. The question is though, is like, Is this was that 3 minute, 4 minute collapse a blip? Was it just like a very historic, epic collapse that happened in one game? Or is that the sign of some other issues with this team that will be, taken advantage of when the competition increases over the next month?
Well,
That's the question.
well, you said, I think you said kind of said in the first half, as much as what happened in the last 4 minutes or 3 minutes, uh, look at the first 57 minutes.
That's true.
And some of the stuff that we saw there was very concerning, including the health. I mean,
But I have
look.
a question for you. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
If the Dolphins take care, if Dolphins hold that 14-point lead, let's say they give up the first touchdown, but the defense gets a stop or the offense runs the timeout. What is the perception of the team after that? If they hold
Because
on to that lead,
because because most people are facile, they're going to just say, okay, that's their record, and they're right there, and they escaped in a situation. But if you're even if they win that, they hold on for that win, you're still looking at the same health situation going forward, and having a healthy having a healthy team at this time of year, having better health than the other guy, that kind of matters. And it doesn't just matter at the quarterback position; it matters everywhere else. You know, um, do you really want to be playing a team like you really facing Dallas with your that pass rush with your essentially your backup offensive line? That's the that's not a fun day for your quarterback. you know. And health is that's a thing. Some of the tendencies that we saw in a pressure situation that they have, a pressure situation they haven't been in for a little while, and an unexpected pressure situation, some of that didn't look good. That was, you know, that doesn't make you feel that doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence for later in the season or January. Um, and that was in the first 57 minutes. So, um, I think the perception if they had won was okay, they got away with one, we move on. But that's fine for that perception. But the reality is some of those same issues would still be that we're looking at going forward are still there. And they're just in a better position, as far as the record and in the standings. But and they're certainly not, concerned about at that point probably losing it's at all about losing the AFC East. But they lost. So now everybody's looking, now it's not such a facile look. And it's like, ooh, not only did they lose, but wait a minute, all these things happened. And how it is with the loss, the bad things that happened, they suddenly get counted, they suddenly get seen. And, then there's some projection. So, yeah, I don't know what the perception is changed by a win versus a loss. Of course it is. But is the reality doesn't change much.
yeah. But I also think that the reality is that I think some of these again, I think it was a bad game. A lot has to go into that. Like, there's so much has to go into, you know, obviously they didn't play well for really the entirety of that game, but so much had to go wrong, in the final 4 minutes, just really kind of
But
lose
so
that
much
game.
had to
But
go wrong in the final 4 minutes. But look at what had to go right for them to go ahead.
no, 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 I'm right. I'm right. I'm getting to that. But I'm saying that I think that also for me again, my biggest issue for the Dolphins right now, or my biggest concern, is just the nature of the injuries, and how much that's going to affect them going forward. Because I think
Yeah.
that, especially the two injuries, like the major injuries, on Monday night that I think that really went back to bite them was on the offensive line and amongst the safeties. Because I talked about it at length, here where without four offensive linemen, they ran the ball well, But I always thought that their strides and pass protection were a little overstated because of the scheme and Tua's quick release and the fact that they're getting the ball out within like 2.4 seconds. Like they're not Tua's not like sitting back there and scanning the field for a long time before releasing the ball. It's very quick releases. So I thought that the pass protection strides were a bit overstated. And I think we saw that with obviously a couple offensive linemen down. The communication issues and some of the issues in on the back end of the secondary without your two starting safeties were also something that I think played a big role in there. And it's like, all right, yes, you know, it. We talk about I mean, we mention it all the time. We talk about next man up and guys having to step up into depth roles, but sometimes like I mean, your star players are your star players and key contributors for a reason. I mean, for the entire season, we've been hearing that Javon Holland is the quarterback of the defense. Deshaun Elliott was dealing with a ribs injury, a concussion injury. Now he's in concussion protocol. He wasn't on the field for those last two touchdown drives by the Titans. If one or both of those guys are in there, potentially the game is a little bit different. I mean, who's to say? Um, but for me, that's the biggest thing. And it's like even if the Dolphins had won that game, I personally would have, had the same reservations, the same. I would have looked at it the same. Because I always say, all wins and losses count the same, but they're not created equal. But if they had won that game, they still would have, been tied with Baltimore for the top spot, and they would have got the edge because of their conference record. And now not only did you not only did you fall one game behind them, but you lost the conference game, which could come back. If you need to, well, I guess in the end it'll probably be the head-to-head game that will decide. But it's
Yeah.
like again, I really believe that if they can get two games at Hard Rock Stadium when it matters most, if they're relatively healthy, I have a lot of confidence they can beat just about any team that comes in there. Because again, for as bad as the Dolphins looked on Monday night, no team in the AFC is perfect. All of them have flaws, and all of them have ways that they can be exploited. I mean, we watched the Chiefs and the Jaguars lose on Sunday. Or at least I watched a Ravens game where, hey, if it's not for just some incredible playmaking by Lamar Jackson late and a punt return touchdown, the conversations around Baltimore are a little bit different because the Rams gave them everything that they could take. And honestly, I watched that game thinking I think Miami might be able to exploit some things with their defense because they run similar offenses in Los Angeles and Miami. So for me, it was more so just losing that game and the fact that now you have to make it up. I still feel I still feel confident that they're going to win the division. I'm not nearly as confident as I was,
24 hours ago.
24 hours ago because of the injuries and because Buffalo looks like they're starting to turn a corner. But we still got 4 games left. This was a very, very disappointing and surprising setback. But I don't want to overreact and say the season's over. Like there's people saying that the Dolphins are going to lose the next 4. I don't think that's going to happen.
No,
I
no,
think
but this is Dolphin fan PTSD.
Yeah, yeah, understandable, understandable. I'm not from here, but I know all
You
about it.
know,
That's
this
understandable.
is 93, 2002, 2003,
Shoot, this is 2022.
2013.
It's 2022 when they lost 5 straight and they had to sneak
Okay.
into the play. So I
Right.
understand it. And Tua himself
Yeah.
he said this is not the same Dolphins team. I mean, we're gonna find out. I didn't read too much into beat up on the Commanders. The Commanders had the worst passing defense in the NFL,
Right.
and the Dolphins did what they were expected to do. Coming off of a kind of a mini bye type of week. They did what they were like expected to do. They didn't take care of their business against Tennessee. They got 3 games coming up. We'll talk about the Jets in a minute. They got 3 games coming up to finish the season that will really show us if this isn't the quote unquote same old Dolphins. But I don't want to overreact because I think that this is still a very good team, a very dangerous team. You
Yeah.
got to get healthy first and foremost. Um, but I still do have a lot of confidence in this team. So we'll see. And obviously, it begins transitioning into the last segment. It begins with the Jets who, they're coming off of a very, like you mentioned, they're coming off of a very big win against the Texans. Obviously, Zach Wilson probably played the best game of his career there. And they're kind of pumping him up on the New York side too after a good game. But it's going to be interesting because when we talk to Mike McDaniel, they've been very cautious with injuries. They said that obviously Connor Williams is out. Javon Holland just, revealed today that he has two sprained MCLs. When I spoke to him last Saturday, he said that it was a slow grind just to get flexibility and comfort back in his knees. So for all the people saying like, why is he being held out? Why is he out there? I mean, it's for good reason. If guys are healthy enough to go out there and perform at their peak, they're going to be out there. So like, it's a legitimate injury. So we got to monitor him. Teron Armstead is, kind of day to day. Robert Hunt probably not going to play. There's a lot of moving parts, but I still think that, if the Dolphins are the team that we think that what we thought they were prior to Monday night, this is a game that you take care of. I don't, on a short week with all these injuries and playing a familiar opponent, it might be a little tougher. I don't think that they're going to run away with it like they did in that Black Friday game, especially because I think that, funny enough, I think they're going to get better quarterback play from Zach Wilson. But I think that this is a game where the Dolphins bounce back. It might be a little bit ugly, but I think they take care of things. I think it's one of those 27-13 type games where they pull away late. But I think that, I think they have a better showing, especially on defense. Because for most of that game, you know, especially for I'll touch on the defense because we haven't done that as much. I thought they actually played pretty well against the Titans. Obviously, there was the two late drives were obviously just not good. They did give up a lot of yards on a late hurry up drive to end the first half. But outside of that, like I thought that they played pretty well. Especially without Jerome Baker, obviously Jalen Phillips is out for the year, and then dealing with some of their injuries on the back end of the secondary. But I think that they'll rebound for sure as well. And I think that all will be kind of right for the most part. They'll kind of get back on track, and then we'll look ahead to again this really telling three-game stretch to conclude the regular season.
Well, I think this is going to be it's going to be an interesting, tough game because, obviously division game. The Jets have a very good defense that keeps them in it.
Yep,
Um,
man, kept them in in
Kept
the
them
Black
in
Friday game until
Black Friday,
the
and
Hail Mary. So
yeah, I mean, if not for that, that's a much more interesting game.
yeah.
So boy, I'll take and I'm not, Zach Wilson, stop clock is right twice a day, you know, blind squirrels find a nut, get a nut, whatever. I'm gonna go 24-10, 24-13 Dolphins. Um, I don't, I mean, could be wrong. And, the Patriots Steelers game, uh, Jets Texans game, I don't see there being a lot of points out of just enough points out of the Jets offense. And,
And
you
even
know,
on the Dolphins offense side, like they're driving, they had five red zone opportunities, and they were 2 for 5, and one of those they left with 0 points because they fumbled on the 2 yard line. Like they're moving the ball. They were still moving the ball. It's just like for some reason, they're and I don't like to like do money morning quarterback over play calls, but I would have liked to see like sometimes I do wonder like why not just kind of like hammer the ball down and see what happens. And we saw that on those last two red zone opportunities. I mean, like I don't think the Dolphins offense is broken. But if you're gonna play without, multiple offensive linemen for the rest of the year, it might not be the same offense that we've seen humming time and time again. But I think that,
right.
they're like I think they're fine. If Tyreek Hill is like legitimately hurt, well, that changes things. But he was able to muscle through it. They said he's day to day. I think my guess is he'll be out there. And I think that, they'll be a little more efficient, a little more productive, especially in the red zone.
I would expect them to use him in a limited way, just because I think you know, they probably need him more against, you know, Baltimore, Dallas, Buffalo. Um, Now that might that might not turn out to be the case, but I I just don't I don't s- I see the Jets giving them a very, very hard time, but I have a tough time seeing the Dolphins lose this. That said, uh, you know, we'll we'll see how fragile the Dolphins are. Because the Jets have that kind of team where something they can make something go wrong at you know early in the game or hang around the way Tennessee did, and get a defensive touchdown, get a turnover or something, and you know we'll see how well the Dolphins bounce back from the first game that the first loss that was just like that was just a bad performance, just a flat out bad performance. Uh, and I think they're pretty resilient, but I think the Jets will test them early. Dolphins win 24-10, and you know, on to on to the last three.
Yeah, like Tua said in his press conference, he was asked how to make sure that this isn't the same similar late season collapses in previous Dolphins teams. Tua said, this isn't the old Dolphins. They're gonna have an opportunity to prove that in the next 4 games. So we'll see. We're both taking the Dolphins to rebound on a short week against a divisional opponent, and we'll see how they do in fact bounce back. All right, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I want to thank you guys as always for tuning in. Reminder to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment. You also subscribe to the Miami Herald. Short week, so a little bit of a different schedule. Normally, Tua, Mike McDaniel on Wednesday. It's not going to be the case. Team's going to be off, no availability on Wednesday, but they're going to be back on Thursday, jam-packed day with Tua, offensive coordinators practice. So we'll hear from a lot of people. Be able to give you updates on the latest injuries involving the Dolphins. So definitely stay tuned to the Miami Herald for more. We'll be back next week to recap another weekend of Dolphins football. But until then, you guys take care. See ya.
Peace.